Andrew, thank you very much for joining us. It's
All
great
right,
to
Pete.
have you here. Uh, this is Andrew Ville. He is the new chair of district who will be settling into his manse hopefully over the next week or so. And this is our chance to actually get to know him. So I'm going to ask him a few questions, get some idea about what his background is and everything else, and maybe even get a look at what he hopes for the future for the district. So, Andrew, lovely to have you here. First question. Where were you born? What was your childhood like?
Thanks, Pete, and thanks for setting up this interview and giving me the chance just to share with you and with others. So I was born in Leicester, up in the Midlands. Both Helen, my wife, and I were both born there. And I was there, well, for 38 years until candidating for the ministry and going off to train at Queen's Theological College in Birmingham. So lived with mum and dad and my younger sister, Jenny. Yeah, Leicester was a good place to be, a very multicultural city, which in later years I certainly valued having had that experience. Worked my way through schooling, but left school at 16 after my O-levels and CSE levels, and went out to work for a firm of accountants as an office junior. Our two sons, we've got James and Sam, they still ask me questions about what does an office junior actually do. So in addition to making the tea and fetching the sandwiches at lunchtime, I would tell them a few other bits and pieces. But yeah, I left school at 16, went out to work and carried on my education at night school in accountancy and finance, which for 20 years became very much my career. Staying with financial organizations and becoming a fraud investigator, a financial investigator, becoming an expert witness for the police in various prosecutions to do with investment and mortgage fraud.
Wow. Not the most average setup from going into ministry then.
Perhaps not, but I very much have seen God at work in that experience and that my working life in helping me as a child, as a teenager. I was very shy, wouldn't want to do anything in front of other people, struggled to really engage in the life of the church in a very public way as a child. Was taken to church though by my mum. My sister and I went to the local Methodist church, and we'll be forever grateful for my mum for taking Jenny and I to church, because that's very much formed, that gave me the foundations of my faith. But I've seen God at work in my life throughout that childhood and the working life, in giving me the opportunity, with the support of others, to overcome some of that shyness and be someone who felt able to stand up and share, both in working life and in my faith life as well.
So from that, I gather, because I'm very quick on the uptake, you grew up as a Methodist.
Yeah.
What was that like in Leicester? Because obviously Leicester would be very multicultural, very multi-faith as well.
Yeah.
Did it?
Yeah.
Was there crossover there? Did you get to meet people and interact with people from other faiths? Yes,
I did, and certainly through my school life, there were friends I had, people I would mix with who were from different faiths, different backgrounds, and indeed in the life of the Methodist Church in the circuit there in Leicester, we would often have opportunities to engage in conversation, and certainly in my teenage years and 20s, meeting up with people of other faiths, helping share something of my faith with them and understanding more of their faith, their understanding of their faith. So shared experience was very important and very crucial for living in that kind of a city. Yeah, really valued that opportunity for those conversations and that experience. And I have to say, I've always found that people of other faiths have been very open and very interested in hearing something about the Christian faith, my understanding of the Christian faith, very interested in exploring that with me. and hopefully they found that I was someone who was always interested in their faith and understanding more of them and their faith. Yeah.
Sounds like an amazing time and an amazing place to be growing up, to be honest. It's
very grateful for it. Yeah.
When you're, I mean, I was born and grew up on the outskirts of Southampton, somewhere very rural, pretty much like the circuit that I'm working with now.
Right.
So I was probably 12 before I met anybody who wasn't white and didn't claim to be Christian.
Right.
And that was a lad who was visiting from Mexico. So
yeah.
The sort of interfaith and intercultural thing is in some ways quite outside of the experience for a lot of people seeing this.
Yes. Yes.
Obviously, as Christians, we figure we've got the right answer. And it can make dealings with people from other faiths quite interesting. How do you find approaching that? Because presumably your faith being in Jesus Christ, you figure you've got the right answer. You talk to people from Muslim faith or Baha'i faith or anything else, they all work on the basis they've got the answer. How do you stop that from becoming antagonistic, I guess is the word I would look for?
I think for me, I approach it in the way that I respect other people's views and their understanding, and therefore respect their faith. I hope they respect my faith. My faith for me has come out of my own personal experience, the opportunities I had to grow up in a very loving Christian community, and to explore my faith, so that I came to a decision to give my life to Jesus, and to follow a particular path, which for me is the right path. And I think God works through me and uses me in that way. And I allow God to do that. I accept and respect the fact that for other people, their own experience, their own understanding of life and faith will be very different from mine. I look at it very much in the fact that I have a faith, that's the faith which is important to me, and I respect other people's faith. I hope and pray that those who hold very dear to their faith are people who are wanting to ensure that certain things happen through them. And for me, that is about a sense of justice, a sense of fairness, a sense of people desiring to live peacefully with each other. And I think if we can follow that within our different faiths, and that certainly is my experience in conversations with people of other faiths, that they hold very true to those elements of their faith as well. And I think if we do that, then actually that's something really positive for us as communities, but also for us living on this much larger planet we call the world.
Yeah. That's a great answer, and a really important one, because one of the things that people within our circuit find is that they volunteer to go to Wickham Festival, and they can end up in conversations with tarot card readers, Wiccans, pagans, the occasional Muslim, and a whole variety of people. And it's a hard one sometimes for people to get their heads around. So I think that's a really helpful sort of way of looking at it. So, big question. How did you move from accounting to ministry?
Well, I always blame God for that, but then I think God's big enough to accept that blame from me. I stayed in the same Methodist church that I spoke about growing up in Leicester. It's where Helen was also a member of the church, and we were part of the same youth group. To cut a long story short, fell in love, got married, had two children, our two sons, James and Sam, and they were part of the church there with us as well. So I was always in the same church, but very fortunate to have some very wise people, in particular a supernumerary minister, a retired Methodist minister, and a local preacher, who both spoke to me and continued to speak to me about the fact they felt God was calling me to be a preacher. I well, I tried to ignore it for quite some time because it didn't really fit in with my plans. I'd been very much part of the life of the church and undertook a number of roles in the life of the church, including involvement with the junior church and involvement in leadership, lay leadership within the church. But I didn't want to do any more. Life was good. Very grateful to God for that. Life was very good. But Ron and Len were my nagging voice. And eventually I had to sit down with Helen and say, you know, Ron and Len keep going on about me being a preacher. Well, I probably ought to do something about it. And we agreed that I would test that call out, go and speak to the superintendent minister, speak with my own minister and some other wise friends and talk about that sense of a call to preach. I started that and within a year, I felt a very strong pull towards giving my life in such a way that it was a full-time ministry. And the ordained ministry was an area I explored. And I kept saying to God, every time I've got to go to a committee meeting or to a panel about this, I'm quite happy for them to say no. I really enjoy the job I'm doing. I really did enjoy my work and enjoyed the family life we got, knew what the implications would be for the family if we were to move. But I kept saying to God, actually, I'm quite happy if the next committee or the next panel, circuit meeting, connectional panels, if they say no, that's absolutely fine. But they kept saying yes. And so before too long, the local preaching studying and everything was completed. I then did some training with the church through what was at the time called foundation training, part-time training, which I could do at Nottingham University because I was working for an organisation who's had its head office. My office was in Nottingham, even though we still lived in Leicester. And then candidated and was successful in that. And the church asked me to do a year's full-time training at Queen's Theological College in Birmingham. And so Helen and the boys and I went there, lived on site for a year. That was a great year. And then went to our first appointment, which actually was in Coventry, so staying in the Midlands. So when I was told about my first appointment, the senior Methodist tutor at Queen said, Andrew, you've heard that saying, being sent to Coventry. Well, you are being sent to Coventry because probationary ministers are sent to their first appointment. But it was a very good appointment and we had some really good years there. So that was my kind of journey through that, and a real sense of saying no to God, but just realizing that God was very persistent, and in the end, it was right to say yes. So after 20 years in business, then began a different kind of career, you might say, but one which has been hugely fulfilling. I'm very grateful again to God for the support through all of that.
So what were your personal highlights from your time as a minister before you sort of moved up in the world?
I think for me, the real passion, the real joy I have in ministry is actually connecting with people, is hearing something of people's story, and then perhaps working with them and sharing with them to find out how I might help in the way that the way that I'm called to do. So I was quite content feeling that being a circuit minister was hugely important, was what I was called to, and really enjoyed the time in my first appointment in Coventry, getting to know people, working with them, seeing God at work in communities, and helping, encouraging people to join in that mission and sharing that. And I really enjoy helping people, I have to say, push the boundaries, take some risks, and not feel so constrained by the structure of the organization of the church, which is hugely important, but actually it's not there to constrain us. It's there to help us and enable us to do what it is God is asking of us. So I thoroughly enjoy working with people. I know some people will call me a strategist at times, and I certainly am. I like working out the strategy with people, seeing what's possible and where we might go with things. And I find that hugely fulfilling and get a sense that's my calling.
So how did the move go from there to sort of district level?
Well, again, I blame God for that. In my
He needs
first,
really big shoulders.
he's got to have big shoulders. God has, I'm afraid, from my point of view. In my first appointment, we were involved in merging, bringing together two circuits, Coventry and the Nuneaton and Atherstone circuit, and my colleague who was superintendent minister was talking to me and sort of saying that he would be sitting down at the end of that appointment. And in conversation with him and with the circuit stewards, I was asked if I would consider becoming the superintendent and staying on in that circuit. So I did, and it took quite a bit of reflection from my point of view, because I realized that becoming superintendent was going to require more time away from the ground, being on the ground, working with people at those grassroots level. But it still felt right that God was saying to me, actually, that's something I want you to do now. And I will continue to work through you as a superintendent. I was then asked by the church to come down to Portsmouth as superintendent, moving sooner than I was expecting to. But again, Helen and I prayed about it, talked about it, reflected on it, felt it was the right thing to say yes to, and we did. And thoroughly enjoyed our time down in the Portsmouth circuit and sharing and bringing three circuits together here. And then working with Andrew Wood as the then district chair, becoming one of the deputy chairs. And all along, just testing it out with God and talking with others about whether or not this feels like the right thing to be doing and what God is asking of me. A little surprise last year to find myself going through the process of becoming the district chair as Andrew was looking to move on to his new role. So yes, I'm quite surprised on the 29th of Feb to be sharing in my induction as district chair for Southampton at Chandler's Ford Church. But again, a real privilege, but a real sense that this is what God is asking of me. And provided I keep saying yes to what I think it is God is asking of me, I know that God is there and will give me the wisdom, the knowledge that I need. And still very much just holding in front of me that sense of getting to know people, getting to know where they think God is asking them, what God is asking of them, what God is asking them to do, and then being prepared to find out, and how can I help? How can I support you in doing that? How can I help you push the boundaries a little bit? Perhaps take some risks, but risks which are well thought through, because I think that is what God asks of us, to keep looking around us, seeing what's happening in the world and where God is asking us to be and what he's asking of us.
I think you've got your work cut out for you there. I think from personal experience, and speaking as one of those people, when people see an opportunity to try something new and they're very excited to try it, it's very hard to actually convince them to think it through properly as well. So you've got a tough job ahead of you with that side of things.
Well, Sorry, I was just going to say, I always find myself energized and excited by sharing with people, talking with people, listening to what it is they think God is asking of them. And sometimes we all need, don't we, that voice of wisdom, which says, that's great, let's see how we can make this happen. We just need to be aware of one or two things as we do that. And perhaps that's my role. Just to see how I can help make things happen for people, but just occasionally ask those questions or point those things out, which say, but we've just got to be aware of this or that as we move forward. And let's try things. Let's try new things. Let's see what works. And if it doesn't work, let's just put it to one side and move on, and keep our hearts and our minds open to what it is God is asking of us.
I think that's the thing. I think it's very easy to get invested in an idea, and it's very hard sometimes to let it go. So
yeah,
it's good to have someone there who can speak about things in a rational and slightly stepped back sort of way.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And to see how things fit in with the bigger picture and with what other people might be doing. And also, I think from the district point of view, and I have to say we have a great district team, of lay and ordained people who are willing just to share with each other. Share their ideas, share their knowledge, share their wisdom. And I think the role of the district is to enable that to happen as well. So that what people are trying in one part of our district, they can hear about the experience of others have had, what's worked for them, what hasn't worked for them. And so I think part of the role of the district is to enable that sharing to take place as well.
About communication. One of the things that I've noticed that coming from outside the Methodist Church is not necessarily that strong on is actually sort of joined up communication. They're very good at joined up thinking, at coming up with ideas and looking to push them forward, but actually communicating stories with each other is something that sometimes doesn't work as often as it could. And I know I've gone to people like David Hollingsworth, for instance. I discovered David just before he moved to London, and actually went to see him at work in Christchurch Market.
Yeah.
And I think we need some way to just sort of shout about these successes that we've got that people are familiar with. What sort of changes do you think you would like to see yourself bring forward for the district as time goes on? I'm not going to pin you down to a timetable on this.
Thank you for that. No, I think, and I'm as guilty as others about not remembering the need to share and communicate more widely. We get very caught up, understandably so. We get very caught up with what we're doing, what we're about, what's happening that particular day, what our responsibility is in anything we may be involved in, project-wise, day-to-day work, etc. And sometimes it is hard to remember that we are part of a connection, and therefore one of the advantages of that is that we can share with others. Not only that, but we can learn from others as well, and find out what we might need to find out in order to move something forward ourselves. So for me, I think that sense of connectionalism is again very important, and we need to find ways of making sure that we do keep that communication going, keep those channels open, put people in touch with one another. Very fortunate, I think, that we've got not only our district officers, but we've got access through the Learning Network to other people who are really good at facilitating open forums and the opportunities for people just to meet up and get together and talk about things. As a new district chair, I had my media training last week with people from London, which was all done via Zoom, as so much is at the moment. But again, a real reminder for me of the expertise and experience we've got in the media team, connectionally, centrally, and people who are very willing to be involved with us in the district, to talk about and report on the things that we're doing. So I think there's a lot we can learn from there. So I hope that in my term, that time in the district, that we'll be able to continue to build on that and to mould something which allows those across the district and then further afield to keep in touch with each other. Certainly, I'm just aware, even after these few short months, of the way that so many individual people are in touch with others around the connection and indeed around the world, and are keeping up to date with what's going on, what the advances in technology can bring us and support us with, etc. And one of the things I've become aware of, certainly through the pandemic, is how some people who were felt very excluded from the church are actually feeling very much more included because of the ability to use technology to keep in touch and to share worship. I think one of the challenges as we move on into a different phase of what the pandemic means for us is that we don't end up with excluding people again from church. We need to find ways to keep people included and connected with us as much as possible. We're never going to be able to do it for every single person, but I think our calling is to make sure that we do it as best as we can, trying not to exclude people from the life of the church, and therefore from the opportunity to be a community with a focus on worshipping God.
Absolutely. You're right. We do have some people within the district who are incredibly good at sharing stories around. Sarah Apothecary, who, when she hears this, will blush, but is an absolute godsend in every sense of the word.
Yeah.
And when you talk to people around the district, Sarah is the one name they all know.
Yes, that's right.
And same with Mark Tizard,
Yeah.
who I believe you've had conversations with previously. Yeah. He's incredibly good at sharing stories. So we've got some amazing people on the district.
Yes, very much.
And it's nice to hear that you obviously aware of that and recognise that and are looking to develop that sort of side of things. When you move and you get settled in, people obviously talk a lot about, oh, it would be great when we get back to normal. It'd be great when we get back to worshipping in church and meeting together and things. And there's obviously a massive plus to that, because we're designed for worshipping together and meeting together. But are there any particular lessons that you've seen over the last few months that you'd like to see carried forward?
Oh yes, I think we do need to spend some real time actually reflecting on the experience of what lockdown has meant for us as community and as church. I think there will be a real need for us to look very hard at making changes to the way that as a church we structure ourselves, and the way that we require people to, for example, just move around the district. It will be important going forward that we don't always have face-to-face meetings. We do not need people to travel for an hour or more for an evening meeting. We can use technology like this sometimes to do that. I think the impact on the world, the impact on our climate is very, very important. And we must not lose sight of some of the things, experiences that we've had. There needs to be new ways of doing some things. And that's not to say that we don't ever not meet up again in person, because of course that we need to do as well. But it's about finding the right balance. And so I'm aware for myself, there will always be that question that I need to ask. Do I need to jump in the car and travel somewhere? Do I need to jump on a train and travel somewhere? Might I be just as effective by communicating with them via Zoom or whatever other medium it's right to use? And therefore making sure that the times that I do travel are the times that are really important to do that and will be really meaningful from that point of view. So I think those are some of the lessons that we will learn from this lockdown experience, and we'll need to make sure that we bring into the ordinary life of the church moving forward. I think also there will be some churches, some communities that will be wanting to think very hard about their future, what their future might look like, what it will feel like for them. And I think as a church, we need to find ways to support people in that exploration of their own particular future for their community. That will undoubtedly mean that some churches will cease to be, and the physical building will close. But it's not to say that the community won't still worship, won't still meet in some way and be there as a community supporting themselves and others. Those are the challenges that we've got to face. And I think our experience of lockdown will and should encourage us to have those conversations moving forward.
Sounds like you've had an opportunity to give that quite a lot of thought already.
That's been some of the advantages of lockdown for me. Yeah.
Recently, I had the pleasure of watching large chunks of conference online, and there was a lot of stuff that came through that will have an impact, particularly around some of the smaller churches and some of the churches with older congregations. Has there been anything that's come through that you're particularly keen to see implemented? Anything that gives you concern? Anything that you're, let's not say concern, anything that you're looking to think about how that's going to affect the future?
I think there was some really good conversations and decisions that came out of conference for us this year, a very different conference, and at times a very difficult conference in being able to debate and talk things through. But it still enabled us as a church to make some really key decisions. I think we are going to have to look very closely at the reports coming out about managing trusteeship, how we run the structure that we are part of, and what the implications are for us in that. I think the really exciting work that was being done around God for All, our evangelism and growth strategy, is going to be hugely important for us over the next few years. I'm really excited about how I can support and work with the circuits as they take on board that, and as they begin to use some of the material there to find their way forward, and to continue to build on the work that they're doing within circuits. So I think those are really important pieces of work for us to look at. We were challenged by young and old at conference to think about what it means for us to live in the world today, and how the decisions we make, financial decisions, practical decisions, really impact on the whole of the world. So, back to the climate, back to the ecology, back to the world, the planet. So I think some of those are going to be really important for us to look at and reflect on over the next few years. So I find it all tremendously exciting. Sometimes I'm overwhelmed by what we could be doing, and have to try and find a way through it all in my own relationship with God. What do we do here? What's the right thing for us to be focusing on at the moment? But just really pleased to be part of sort of a district team, and that's the circuits and district officers working together in working through all of that. So very much looking forward to the months and years that lie ahead.
And the God for Everyone stuff that Trey Hall brought to the conference was incredibly inspiring from my own point of view.
Yeah.
Because he was essentially talking about my job.
Yeah.
So it was nice to see someone at conference on board with the sorts of things that I was trying to push forward.
Yeah.
One of the things that comes up constantly within the circuit is several of the churches have quite an older skew in their congregations. If you're sort of 60, you're part of the youth.
Right.
So there is a concern that's voiced every so often that says, oh, we need younger people, we need families, we need young people who can do things. And I find that attitude personally very difficult, because I think that just because someone's old doesn't mean they're without any use. No. How do you think we can look at introducing more younger families and younger people to Methodism, but B, and possibly more importantly, how can we make the congregations that we've got feel like they have some capability, some worth, and some value? Because from personal experience, they seem to think they lack it. Right.
I'm always sad when people do feel that that they're no longer valued or cared about in whatever Christian denomination, in whatever community. I think part of the challenge for us is to remind ourselves that God loves all of us. That God loves all of us. And for those of us within a particular denominational church, we seek to live out our faith within the structure, certainly, within the organization that we belong to. I think sometimes for us within the Methodist Church, we need to perhaps be more aware of the what is it that makes Methodism different perhaps to others? What is our calling? And I was very pleased a couple of years ago when the church just highlighted again that the four areas of our calling, so that we can just remind ourselves what it is that we are called to do as being members of the Methodist Church. We have a specific calling, just as all the other denominations have their specific callings. We're called to live out that within the communities where we find ourselves part of. And I agree with you. I think that everyone has a calling, and everyone has the opportunity, should have the opportunity to live out that calling within their own church family, within their own church community. Some churches will have a focus in a particular area. The churches that I've had pastoral oversight of, where I've been minister for a period of time, some of them have been much older congregations. And so I've tried to share with them and explore with them, what is it God is asking of us? It's unlikely, as that kind of congregation, we're going to attract loads of families and young people, because that's not the kind of community we are. But there will be many other people of a similar age in our community. Maybe our calling is to them, and we need to find ways of doing that, and letting other communities look at families or younger people. I was very pleased when the district made the appointment of Tiz as the intergenerational mission enabler, because for me that was again just highlighting the fact that everyone has a calling. And it's about how we help people live out that calling and understand that calling in their own community and in their own life. Delighted with those areas and those communities which do reach out to families and young people. And I hope and pray that we can continue to build on that as a district, and help circuits build on that as we move forward. I think we need to perhaps just as a church just know ourselves what it is, what is distinctive about us at this moment in time. What can we focus on? I am one a minister who over time has encouraged people to understand and look at what is it they can let go of, because we can't do everything. And so let's set some things aside and concentrate on other things. And if we've got it wrong, well, that's fine. You know, we'll go back and we'll do it again, and we'll move on and do something different. But let's have a go. Let's focus on this and let go of some other things. And I know the challenge is there for those of us who are leaders within the church at district and national level, to find ways to help people let go of some things. And that includes the way that we structure ourselves, the way that we organize ourselves, the way that we run the church. So I hope that we're able to do that over the next few years as well.
Within the Meon circuit, we have one lady who's been housebound for probably more years than I know of, a good 10 years at least. And she prays every single day for a list of people that's probably about 20 foot long now. Right. We also, she's up at 5:30 most mornings, so she gets all the prayers in. We also have a thing that has been particularly run by the Bishop's Waltham Church, which is largely a much older congregation, called the Meon Angels. Right. Where they have knitted or crocheted little angel figures, probably 4 inches tall, that have a tag attached to them with a scripture and a blessing and some information about the church, that they basically scatter around the whole circuit over the Christmas period. Now, I have to be honest, first time I engaged with these, I thought, well, that's the most pointless, silly thing I've ever seen. But I'll do it anyway, because that's what I'm here for. And on that, I left one in Bishop's Waltham car park, and a couple of weeks later it appeared on the Facebook page, a photo of it, with a note just saying that it said, I lost a good friend to cancer 2 weeks ago. I found this, and it was like God telling me everything was okay, and that person was with him now. At that point, once I finally stopped crying, I've used that as a standard now and said, well, if you can crochet, you can spread the gospel, you can share God's word, there's work out there that you can do. Is there any area that for you think is something we could build on?
I mean, isn't that just wonderful to hear of people's own story, of what, you know, they sense God is placing on their heart and what they want to do. I am hugely grateful for those people who have said to me that I am on their prayer list each day. because just knowing that somebody is connecting with God on my behalf, I just find it humbling, but I find I'm so grateful for it. And I mean, just people using their abilities in order to share something of the gospel message, that message of good news, that message of God's love. I mean, isn't that just great? And hearing about people, I couldn't crochet to save my life, but I know people who do, which is fantastic. In the district over the pandemic, we've had numerous people making face masks and other items for the hospitals. And it's been tremendous just seeing that taking off. And for me, it's just a way of God working through Methodist people. And I know other people in other denominations as well. But for those of us in the church, God working through us. And encouraging us to do something to reach out and support people who are working on our behalf and working for others in the life of our communities. I just think that's great. And I would just love to keep saying to people, you know, tell me your story. Tell me what it is you do. How are you able now to allow God to work through you in that way? I think that's what God asks of us. He doesn't say, I want you to do these superhuman things. He says, you've already been blessed with different gifts and skills, and I just want to work through you now with those. Let's find ways of helping people do that, to understand what it is that they're being asked to do and to go ahead and do it.
It has been amazing, particularly the mask extenders. I know that for the circuit, I was picking up mask extenders from different places, and then Sarah got me to collect some from other people as well. And over the 4 or 5 week period, I probably delivered somewhere in the region of 7,000 to her.
Amazing, wonderful.
And then on top of that, there were people who were doing them for local nursing homes, different things like that. I know we are all saved by grace, but there is a sense that people want to do works as a way of showing, I guess almost as a way of showing their appreciation for that grace.
Yeah.
And I think although we don't need works, works are a great way of actually connecting with people outside the faith as well.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you've encountered while being in Leicester and Coventry and Birmingham or anything that you could sort of offer up that might strike a chord with someone, something that you've seen done that somebody might look at and go, ooh, that could work in such and such a place?
I think for me, one of the real themes for my ministry, and perhaps of my life as well, is that sense of hospitality, and that sense of hospitality being offered through and around food and gathering together. So even in my early days in ministry, going back to 2002, for the next few years in Coventry and Nuneaton, working with people where we realized that actually what we could offer in churches at certain times was hospitality. We could offer food, we could offer a gathering place. And so midweek opportunities developing whereby very simple food was being offered, simple in as much as bread and cheese, but a place of people to gather together. And as people do that, that group of people working out for themselves, what is it we want to do in this space and this time? So we don't set up any set liturgies, you might say, or any format of words or symbols or actions you've got to use, just allowing people to gather together and let God work through that gathering. And so, times of worship which have come out of that, which have been very different, a freedom for people just to connect with each other and share in fellowship with one another and be supported in that way. So through my ministry, that's what I've tried to help and encourage people. And sometimes myself, when I'm brave enough to take the steps, is simply turning up at a church with just a load of food, no planned service, let's sit and eat and share together. And then when I did that in one of my churches, one of the chaps coming up to me and saying, I've been coming to church all my life, Andrew, and this was the best service I've been to. And I thought to myself, And I had no planning in that whatsoever, because I didn't lead anything. It was all God. And the fact that he could sit and spend time talking with people and finding out more about the people he worshipped with every week, but he didn't know very well, for him was just hugely enlightening, and a real testament to that community. So I think for me, that's the thread that when I look back over ministry, has very much been there, that sense of hospitality.
Yeah, hospitality in relationships.
Yeah.
I'll make an invite now while I've got you here. Hopefully next year there will be a Wickham Festival. You and your wife are welcome to come along as the circuit's guests, and we'll get you into the festival. You can see what we're up to and enjoy the rest of the festival. That
would be great.
But in the meantime, unless there's any message that you'd like to close with, we can wind this up and I'll let you get on with your day.
That's all right, Pete. I mean, it's really good, to have just shared in the conversation with you. So thank you for that invite. I want to thank you and all those that will be listening to this, particularly in the Meon Valley Circuit, just for the way that people continue to share and support one another. And just to say that, the district are here. Please do get in touch if there's things that you feel it would be good for us to know about, or for us to be able to support you with, and we will do what we can. But just my grateful thanks on behalf of the wider church for the folk in the circuit and all that goes on within the communities and the churches. Just pray God's blessing on you all. And I very much look forward to the time when I can physically come and be present with you at different moments in the life of the circuit and the local churches. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks very much, Pete.